All right, it is 6:30 PM, and I will call the Charter Review Commission of May 12th to order. First up, roll call.
Herval,
Here.
Knight,
Here.
Ford,
Here.
Villalobos,
Here.
Walsh,
He's online.
I see him.
Can you unmute Mike?
Walsh, can you hear us?
Can you hear us, Mike? Maybe not.
I'm guessing no.
We can come back to him.
Okay.
Glickler,
Here.
Kirkwood.
Here.
He had told me he was going to be using headphones,
Oh.
and he doesn't have them on, so it makes me wonder, maybe I can text him and see if we can get him.
He's trying to talk, but we can't hear him.
No, he's talking away.
Yeah, he's talking.
Oh, we know you can hear him. Oh, he's at.
He just shoved somebody out of the way. Can you hear us, Mike? Okay. We'll come back. All right, item number 2, approval of the minutes. Did everybody have a chance to review the minutes? Do we have any revisions or comments? Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion
Second.
by Mr. Glicker, seconded by Ms. Ford. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay, motion passes. All right, item number 3, citizen comment period. The Charter Review Commission welcomes comments from our citizens. And those wishing to speak, please use a sign-in form and hand it to Jennifer. But I have one form already completed, and it's by Mr. Howard Connell. Would you like to speak, sir?
Forgot my hearing aids, so I'm kind of at a loss tonight. Is this working?
Yes,
All right.
we can hear you.
Before I start, I want to tell you something. I'm really impressed with all of you. The way you work together, the way you bring up issues, and the way you twist them and wring them out like a cloth, and balance your thoughts with each other. And it's very impressive. I'm very impressed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, so everybody has a copy of this. Even Amy and Jennifer have a copy. I just want to get this on the record. Forget the errors, it was a rush deal. Madam Chair and Charter Commission members, good evening. My name is Howard Connell. Through a chain of emails with the city secretary, I've recently learned our city's code of ethics and credit card policy are deemed legally insufficient if either are used for a basis of a citizen's complaint against any employee and/or city officers. Personally, I've had 2 such complaints summarily dismissed for this reason. I have word searched the city charter looking for any references addressing lying, deception, fraud, purpose, negligence, inappropriateness, omissions, misrepresentations, accuracy, and/or lack of incompetence without success. That could result in any personal gain to an accused in any manner. The Charter Preamble reserves to the people only the powers of initiative, referendum, and recall. These recourses are grossly inadequate to deal with the daily looting of public funds through the mismanaged and inadequate processing of city credit card policy. Actually, it should be receipts. I have compiled a list of questionable credit card transactions appearing to have been systemically passed through the vetting process before being set off for payment. All of these alleged transactions have resulted in personal gain to the recipient submitter. Since the institution of a credit card system, the record would show tens of thousands of dollars have been squandered by officers due to a lack of sufficient accountability to ensure appropriate protocols are in place and enforced fully to comply with the appropriate policy. Abusers seem to have adopted a penny saved is a penny earned philosophy in using their credit card privileges while simultaneously banking their monthly stipend $500. Should I be called upon to sustain my allegations, I am prepared to provide necessary documentation to sustain them. I strongly urge the committee to address this concern for the greater good of the hardworking taxpayers of Kyle and let the council wrestle with it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing that there's no one else wishing to speak, I will close public comment. Moving on to item number 4, consider impossible action. Number 2, under number 4, consider approval of recommended changes to Articles 11, 12, and 13 of the city charter. Amy?
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Amy Alcorn, City Attorney for the record. I'm going to see if we can get the red line to come up to talk about changes we discussed last meeting on Articles 11, 12, and 13. 11 is just listed as a reminder for those last 2 provisions, which are up right now, showing that they were, the instruction was to move them to 13, but I just wanted to bring that reminder before we moved on. I do think there was a vote. Article 12, I'm going to skip the first couple of sections on the ethics.
Amy,
Commission.
excuse me.
Yeah.
Commissioner Knight.
I still think that they should go in section 1.
Okay, we're talking about the whole charter at the end, so we can get there.
So we're just going to ignore that for now.
Well, no, we.
I have it in 13, so you can talk about it when we get to 13, but we're also talking about the entire charter tonight, so if you see a better place as we're going through it, you can let me know. It's the last item.
Okay. We'll talk about that when we get to it. All right.
I'm skipping 12.01 and for now because I had that benchmarking on the Ethics Commission. That's going to be a separate item. So the next one is 12.03. And I just lost my place on my screen, so hold on. 12.03 is the exception for purposes of eminent domain if the city's trying to buy a portion of my property to expand the road in front of my house. I copied that from, I believe it was San Marcos, which had pretty much the same provision with this exception put in. Yes, ma'am.
That last sentence of 12.03, stating that it should not apply to purchases from the city of land, materials, supplies, or services, blah, blah, that are made available for purchase to all members of the public.
like it?
I don't like that.
Okay.
I think that's a potential area of possible abuse in the future. And, you know, yeah, it might be available to all, but city councilmen are elected representatives, so they may have to sit out some of those purchases.
Right, this is more, my intent was more for city employees than city council, but I understand what you're saying.
It would go with city employees as well.
I would like to leave it for land, like if my house is for sale and city wants to buy my house at the asking price that I have it on the market for, I feel like that's a reasonable thing to allow them to do. But
I don't.
that's just my opinion, so if you
Yeah.
guys have a different
I
opinion,
don't.
that's fine.
Sorry. You can quit.
I'm not gonna quit to sell my house to the city.
Does anybody else have any other thoughts in regards to that last sentence on section 12.03?
And I did copy that whole provision straight from San Marcos, so if we don't like it, that's fine.
That's the 1203. I think one of the biggest things that I saw out of that too is, you know, is to really clarify whether the disclosure is still required, even if the 1%, even if it's less than 1% of interest to that property. And I think at least a disclosure at a minimum, even if they're not going to withdraw themselves, is correct. And
So if they purchase, the reason I brought this up was I'm a city employee and I live in the city, and so I was
Yes.
concerned if they wanted to expand my road, that they couldn't purchase the property from me. So is your suggestion that we could sell it under eminent domain, but we would still have to disclose it on our, like, annual financial
Absolutely.
report?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That's fine. I don't see an issue with that. I just want to make sure I understood you. So So we get rid of that second sentence if everybody wants to, and then we'll add, the employee will report.
I don't have a
to
problem
such
with the second sentence.
Okay.
So, I mean, I just want to express my opinion. I think, like you said, you got it from the city of San Marcos. I think, you know, if we're getting into micromanagement at this point, it throws the government in flux. I don't have a problem with what Alex said, but I don't have a problem with this language either.
It's just it's a clarity issue, right? Clarity, consistency with the transparency standards that you're putting throughout the charter. And I think that's the reason for it. If we're going to base ourselves on consistency, because I know that when you guys have gone through it, and just reviewing with the work that you guys have done, you've been carefully addressed consistency across the charter. So that's just one point of consistency.
Okay, so what I've done right now is type in a second sentence in there between the two that I've added, which is not going to show on your screen because she's doing your screen. That says the city officer and employee will report the sale of the next financial on the next financial disclosure if such officer or employee is required to file the disclosure. Only certain employees are required to file it, and so I don't want to make an employee who's not normally required to file a disclosure now have to do it because they had their house taken by eminent domain or something. Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Knight.
Perhaps it's best that that last sentence actually go into the ethics ordinance rather than the city charter.
I would argue that if it's going to be permissible, it needs to be in the charter.
Well, then we need to add a whole lot more to the charter.
Okay. Well, because the charter specifically says that a city employee can't have a direct or indirect interest in a contract, if we're now making an exception to that, it's going to have to be in the charter. You can't make the exception outside.
Right.
I don't think that purchases of city land, materials, supplies, or services should be available to city council or employees.
Just
Blanket.
just to be the devil's advocate here, I buy my water from the city. Is that a problem?
That comes under franchises.
That's a service from the city that I purchase from the city, just like
Well,
any other resident who lives in our CCN.
You were the one who put in services.
Right.
I didn't.
Just a devil's advocate.
I
The same
mean-
idea. If the city's selling land and I
I
want to
believe
buy
that
that
the
land, I
state
can't buy
health
it.
code will cover you on water.
I don't think that you should be excluded from anything that any citizen can't because you work for the city. Because if you live in the city, then, I mean, you have a dual role. And as long as it's disclosed, like Alex said, all
Yeah.
right? As long as it's disclosed, like Alex said, if you're only doing something that every other citizen is doing, I mean, I think that's the whole point of this section in the first place. And I don't think that city officers or employees who live in the city should be foreclosed from opportunities that are available to every single other citizen of the city.
I don't necessarily negate what you're saying. However, we're now in an era where the city is purchasing land without appraisals. That is a no-no in my book.
So now that I've actually reread the second sentence, it's allowing, I believe its original intent was to allow the employees to purchase from the city, not to allow the city to purchase from the employees.
Right.
So if I'm a resident and I want to buy like VIP passes to Kyle Fair,
Right. But if
I'd be
council,
allowed to do that just like any other resident, right? Versus saying I can't buy stuff from the city.
That's the way I understood it.
Commissioner Knight.
My problem is, generally, when, let's say there's like excess supplies or materials, and so they're gonna be put out for highest bid, there's gonna be employees probably overseeing that. How does the public get notice? I mean, what if it's put in the paper, which no one reads or buys?
I'm going to
And
have to look
so
at how we do auctions
There
here.
are people on the inside who are gonna have knowledge of it that the public as a whole does not.
I mean, I think that is covered by this, that are available for purchase to all members of the public. We could put under the same terms as all members of the public, which would suggest that if you have separate opportunities, you can't purchase it. But if there's a whole list of things that are for sale, say furniture, office furniture and you want some furniture, and you're the highest bidder, are we now going to say, no, the city can't accept the highest bid even though it's higher than the other bid because that's an employee?
Highest bid is not even mentioned in here.
No, it's not. But you're the one that brought up the bid, so that's just the suggestion.
Right, but maybe that should be in there.
Okay. We can tweak that and make it more clear.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with it.
Okay. Do you want me to take another shot at it and bring it back next time?
That would be great.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good at second shots.
I mean, this one I literally just copied out of a different code, so I haven't messed with it.
Okay.
I can mess with it now, if that's what you'd like me to
Thank
do.
you.
I had a quick update. Michael Walsh is going to try to call in because his microphone and speakers aren't quite working. So
Okay.
he's going to try to call in.
He will stay on camera though as well, correct?
Hmm?
He'll stay on camera as well,
Yeah, we have
Okay.
camera.
just making sure.
Okay. All right.
And then the other provision, the new provision that I've added in 12.06
No, let's.
is the limitation
let me
on
test
city
this.
council
Can you
future
hear me
employment with
right
the
now?
city. So this would prohibit a city council member from accepting employment with the city for at least
Can you-
1
can you
year
hear me right
after
now?
they get
I'm
out of
got the-
office.
I'm unmuted.
I hear him talking, but I can't quite make it out.
It's not loud enough.
Yes.
I don't know. Mr. Walsh, could you try to speak again? No, I can't hear him.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll have more success trying to call
Yes,
him.
apparently there's some lag.
Oh, there you are.
There you are. There we go.
1, 8, 3, 6, 1, 1, 2. This meeting ID does not exist.
Here, if you can mute again while you
Please
figure out the
re-enter
phone.
ID. Only that channel.
All right. So let's give him a little bit to figure that out.
You entered
12.06 was requested by the commission
Sorry.
at the last meeting.
ID.
All right, muting.
There we go. Okay. 12.06 was requested by the commission at the last meeting to have a break between the time a person gets off council and accepts a position as an employee.
It's a revolving door policy.
The recommendation was 1 year.
The standing has been 2 years in municipalities.
It's been written out of the ethics.
So in the ethics ordinance, we
I'm
have
good
a
with two.
provision that prohibits you from representing somebody else against the city for 2 years, but it would not prohibit a council member from accepting employment with the city. We could do both for 2 years if that's what you wanted to do. I believe the instruction last meeting was 1.
Well, I
But I
think
think
so.
that that's, and just as a personal experience, coming off the council and applying, I was specifically and directly told that I couldn't because it's within the 2 year.
I like 2 years.
You like 2 years?
I think,
I'll
Stuart,
take 2 years.
I'll take 2 years.
Okay, we can change that to 2.
And then, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
Well, that's interesting.
before we get down to 1206, I think there was something on 1204 because I think it directly relates to 1203 with regards to recusal or participate in deliberation or decision of any issue, 1204. And it doesn't really specify. I think it'd be great if we specified whether recusal includes absence from the meeting or only abstaining from voting. And there's a couple of different reasons why that's the case. In my experience as being and getting opinion from the Ethics Council for the city and for the county, there's a distinct reason for either way.
So I personally think this one very clearly prohibits you from speaking on the item, deliberating, contacting staff about the item. It does not say you have to get up and leave the meeting. Is that what you want it to say?
Well, I think that there's situations in the negotiation piece, especially if there's an interest by one of the members that they need to be I mean, they're always going to get it from the council, right? They're always going to get it later on, but I think the mere appearance of that draws people to conclude that there might be an issue, right? So, and I'm very sensitive to that because I had to follow that rule myself as a council member.
So we would say no officer or employee shall participate in deliberation or decision on any issue.
No.
Nor be present at a meeting?
We just need to make sure that we clarify when that is the case and when it's not the case, right? Because you have varying degrees of situations when there's negotiation. I think that the thing that I was, the idea in my mind and by two different attorneys was, if you're representing two entities, you have to be able to, in the primary, as a council member, represent the city as a whole. And if you have an interest in something else, then how can you do that when you're taking vote or you're part of the discussion?
Yeah.
Right? Because you can influence the way people think with regards to that. So I think that that's probably something, just as a personal experience in the city as a council member, I understood it, and I did leave, and I did not have conversation about that particular issue. And I did not help drive or influence the discussion at all. So I had to sit outside, and then I came back in for the next item.
I would agree. I think recusal should be specifically mentioned.
And, you know, you, as the attorney, I think there's a way to put that down, to give some discretion. But I think the broader sense is that the mere appearance is an issue.
I'm just trying to look at how it plays with 3.08, because 3.08 specifically requires council members to vote on every item unless they have a conflict of interest. So this one might be a thinker, and I can work on something to try to make them harmonize so that it's more clear.
If you look back, I think it was in 2016, 2017. There was an opinion that was written. I directly asked for the opinion from our ethics council, and it's written out. So there's something there for you to look back on.
Amy, how would this fall also if you had a council member that was also within an investor-owned utility within the city limits, and there was perhaps a vote to settle a settlement offer with that investor-owned utility to not increase rates? Would that council member who actually resides within that water utility have to recuse themselves?
It's an interesting question.
It's happened.
Yeah.
Usually these things have happened. Typically, you have to recuse if you get a benefit that's different from the public at large.
Okay.
And so I'd have to understand the facts of what the benefit is and how it was different. Obviously, it'd be different than people who weren't part of the investor-owned utility. Right. But say it's a water utility and everybody in their neighborhoods in that water utility, you don't have the choice to be in another one. Is it different than the public at large? It would just be an analysis of the facts.
Okay.
And there has to be a certain amount of discretion, but, you know, absolutely, and that's what I'm gathering what you're saying. If we make it too strict and direct, and then we're going to wind up creating other issues later on. But the one in particular I was talking about, I think that's probably another opportunity to review it one more time. Okay.
I can play with it and kind of see it. Like I said, I'm looking at 3.08, which is they have to vote unless they have a conflict. And so I want to make sure that if we're opening up the definition of conflict, we do that clearly.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
we can.
And either way, I'm good either way. I'm just talking by experience, and I have a hunch that it was politics. But if it's something that has good standing, then I think it's worth to look at.
Okay. All right. So then 12.06, we've changed to 2 years, and everybody's good with that.
Can I go back to what you're talking about with the conflict of interest? I'm looking at 3.08 and 12.04. And 3.08 says conflict of interest without defining it, and 12.04 defines it. So I feel like cross-referencing 3.08 with 12.04 would accomplish a lot of what we're talking about here, because 12.04 says specifically personal, financial, or property interest, direct or indirect. So whether that answers the question or at least guides you, I'm looking at it and I see it that way. If we cross-reference it,
Yeah.
as we have with other sections, I think it addresses it. If we want to expand it, we expand it in 12.04, but if we reference it in 3.08, it closes the circle.
We can definitely get to that when we get to the rest of the charter at the end. That's a good suggestion, to reference
Well,
12.04 and
we're on
3.08.
12.04, so I wanted to give it to you, Amy.
Just, go ahead, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
And just as an add to what he's saying, is I think it's important that 1204 talks about employee. And if we're talking about elected officials, then it also has to be clear on. if
Yeah, it
we're-
says officer or employee, so officers are defined to include city council.
all right.
Go ahead, Lila.
I agree with Commissioner Glickler. But on top of that, when I read 12.01, and it's mainly about the Ethics Commission and the fact that the city council will adopt an ordinance. But nowhere in this article does it really state the purpose of an ethics commission or an ethics ordinance.
Okay.
Which I know, that's not easy to, but I think it can be done in a single sentence.
I've intentionally skipped 12.01 because I've done benchmarking on how other cities define their ethics commissions, and we're gonna get to
Okay.
that. But what you'll find is that there's a big difference in various cities' charters. Some of them have one sentence total, some of them have, like, basically the entire ethics ordinance written out in the charter, and so it just depends on how you wanna go.
All right, on section 12.06, do we pretty much have a unanimous vote to change that to 2 years?
Yes.
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 Okay,
Okay?
all right.
Do we have to take a formal vote on that, right?
Well-
We're not canvassing votes right now, are we?
No, but you want to make a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the 2 years.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right,
Okay, 13.06 is the next change that I put in. And that was on the public records where we have this large paragraph with a lot of information that I've basically changed to reference the Texas Public Information Act and state laws regarding record retention.
anybody have any changes to section 13.06? Comments? No? All
Move to accept.
right.
Second.
All right. First by Commissioner Glicker, second by Commissioner Knight. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Okay, 13.08. I took a shot at this one because there was a lot of conversation about it. I adjusted it from every 5th year to every 6th year to have a full charter review commission. And then I added this little paragraph at the end that allowed for an interim charter review commission to review specific issues recommended by council to change as opposed to going through the whole charter.
Yeah, and I guess it addressed the substantial, there will be, before it comes out, we'll understand whether it is or isn't. I mean, that's the disclosure for the community, right? Whether-
Well, the thing I was trying to address was 5 versus 2, so that so that whatever year we do this charter review commission is divisible by 2, so that we don't have a situation where council's reviewing it 1 year
Okay.
and then it doesn't line up, which is what happened this year.
I saw that, yeah.
And so then the suggestion with doing that was to create this idea that if council's reviewing the charter every 2 years and they think, hey, it'd be really great to change this, but let's see what the public thinks, they could call an interim committee that might only meet 2 or 3 times to look at that specific change.
Yeah.
I like that idea. I think it fills in the gap that we had when we talked about the numbers last time. So I'll move to accept the changes to 13.08.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, then first by Commissioner Glicker, second by Commissioner Kirkwood, I'm sorry. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right.
13.09 and 13.10 are those 2 provisions that used to be in 11. That's where I'm suggesting putting them. I think there may be disagreement about that, and we can work that out. All
right, let's do section 13.09 first. Everybody good with it being in Section 13?
No,
No.
What's the reason?
it doesn't make any sense here. This is like sort of general stuff, general provisions. But Article 1 specifically states in the title that it concerns incorporation, form of government, and powers of the city. And so if you're talking about city-owned services and parks, that falls under powers of the city. And the same with contracts concerning city property. And if I was gonna look this up, I would look for it in Article 1.
So the context, Commissioner Villalobos, was I recommended moving these because I thought if I was going to look for a prohibition on selling a swimming pool or contracting for the management of a city-owned facility, a civic center, I wouldn't look under utilities, which is where it was. It was in Article 11, which was franchises and utilities. So my first suggestion was to put it here in general provisions because it's kind of the catch-all.
Yeah.
I don't disagree that it could maybe fit somewhere else better, but this was the first place I could think of.
Well, it's under contracts concerning city property, right? So, I mean, if you're gonna be looking and changing it into that area,
Right.
you're looking through that topic in general, I think that's where it fits, but it's not hidden. It's under a large caption, it's part of it. And severability is largely contracts. Am I correct, Glickler? Right?
Sorry, I didn't hear you. I was trying to catch.
Severability,
Yeah,
typically under contracts?
yes.
It's usually in the miscellaneous provisions of the contract,
Yeah.
severability. I don't know whether election required / contracts and concerning city property would normally be in miscellaneous or not. But there wasn't really a section that screamed city property issues to me either.
I stand by what I said last meeting, is that these are specific enough to me to fall under miscellaneous. I think 13 makes sense.
It's one of the powers of the city.
I agree with Commissioner Ford.
Do you want to take a vote on leaving it in 13?
Do I have a motion to leave it in Section 13?
I'll move to leave it in Section 13.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No,
There you go, motion passes
Is that just 13.09 or is that both?
5,
What did I say?
13.09.
I think it was just 13.09.
Okay.
Yeah, just
Do you
13.09.
want to take a vote on 13.10?
Okay,
I'll move to leave it in 13.
Yeah.
okay.
Was
Do
there
I
a
have a
second?
second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Glicker and a second by Commissioner Kirkwood. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
nay.
Okay, motion passes 5-1. All
So,
right,
apart from the renumbering, the only change I have left is the new 13.12, which was the open meetings compliance, where I think Mr. Glickler thought I was being a little bit too picky here, but I want to make it abundantly clear to everybody how the meetings are going to run, and so this would require the application of the Open Meetings Act, even if the Open Meetings Act doesn't otherwise apply under law.
I move that we accept this change.
all right, do I hear a second?
Point of order, I think we need to move to accept the numbering change on 11, on
11,
severability
yes.
and the numbering change and this change. But I would amend your motion, if you'll let me, to approve the 2 numbering changes as well as this section.
I have no problem with that, although under the non-substantive revisions, renumbering it doesn't have to go to a vote of the voters.
That's the next
That
section.
is accurate,
Yeah,
13.13,
Yeah.
correcting numbering
But
errors and
I'll
renumbering.
accept that amendment.
I'll just make
I'm
you
not
clear
gonna
that we're
nitpick.
all in favor of what you did there.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion to correct the numbering and adopt, we're in agreement with the revision to Section 13.12. We have a first and a second. First by Commissioner Knight, seconded by Commissioner Glicker. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 5-1, 5 or 6-0. All right. Is that all the sections?
That's the entire charter.
Okay,
So
moving on to, no. Section 3, or number 3. Consider amendment to the regular schedule of commission to choose an alternative date if necessary for May 26, 2025, due to the Memorial Day holiday. And I would also like to discuss the actual, is it number 6, receive a report, hold the discussion, provide staff feedback on review of potential recommended changes, articles for the whole charter?
yes.
Okay,
And that presentation has a little bit about when you're expected to present to council as well.
okay. I would, if it's within everyone's schedule, I would like to schedule, cancel the meeting on May 26th, which is Memorial Day weekend, and try to schedule a meeting in June to go over item number 6 in its entirety. Because I think, I don't know if all of you have been keeping up with the necessary changes, but I would like to go back to the minutes and refer and go through the minutes versus the actual charter that's being presented on item number 6.
Okay. So we currently have meetings scheduled for, I believe, the 9th and the 23rd of June.
Okay.
Would we like a third meeting or just one of those two?
Just one of those two.
Okay.
Okay. But I would like to move to cancel the meeting on the 26th.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay. And then,
Can I
yes,
ask a question?
Oh.
If she wants to move item number 6 to a June meeting, what would we have left to do coming into June after tonight?
So item number 6 is to go over the whole thing and any tweaks you guys might have on there.
Right.
And then, there's 2 meetings. The suggestion would be the second meeting would be the final vote and maybe some discussion of the presentation that the commission's going to give to council,
Okay.
and how that would work.
What was the date?
June 9th?
June 9th,
We
okay.
already we should already have that scheduled, the 9th and the 23rd.
Oh, okay, all right.
But if we're done on the 9th, we can be done on the 9th,
Okay. Well,
with the exception of perhaps asking you to approve some minutes.
I am not going to be available on the 9th.
Okay.
Is there any way possible that we can make the June meetings the 16th and 23rd?
Or the first Monday? What's the first Monday?
The second? Either way, if that's okay
There's-
with y'all. I can do the second, I can do the 16th, I can do the 23rd, I can do the 30th. I don't want to have been through all of this and missed that, but I mean, if it is, it is. Is that available?
wait,
None of them?
So Monday, the 2nd is Board of Adjustment, and then the Monday, the 16th is Train Depot.
isn't,
So maybe a different day of the week.
okay, wait a minute, isn't Juneteenth a federal holiday?
The 19th.
The
Oh,
19th?
19th, okay. I was gonna move it to the 9th.
All right, so what's that for the first week though? That's, so the second is Monday, Tuesday's I guess, a city council meeting, right?
Tuesday's going to be a council meeting. Wednesday is an ethics commission meeting.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
Thursday night?
June 5?
Thursday
Which day?
free? June 5th?
June 5th.
June 5th or June
June 5th
12th?
is open.
June 5th? Can y'all do June 5th for me? I'll bring snacks.
We'll hold you to.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, if you don't show up,
I'll be here
We're-
June 5th.
we're gonna give you a responsibility you
I
don't
almost
want.
brought you a tray full of empanadas tonight, Lila, so,
Oh, well, where are they?
well, I said almost, but I'll bring them. I'll bring them June 5th.
Okay, so we're talking about June 5th and June 23rd, or
Yeah,
June?
5th and 23rd.
5th and
Okay.
23rd.
5th and 23rd.
I'll move to that we make our first meeting in June on June 5th, Thursday, June 5th.
I'll second it, but it's not on the agenda.
We're moving the meeting from the 26th to the 5th, is what I just heard.
Oh, okay.
Isn't it on
Yeah.
number 3?
It says choose an alternative meeting date. It
Consider
doesn't
amendment.
say.
Okay.
I think it's
Okay.
a mo.
I heard it from Amy. Okay. Commissioner Glicker made the motion. I second it. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Thank you all very much.
Okay. June 5th and June 23rd will be the next two meetings.
You can bring snacks on the 23rd. It's my birthday.
And the 5th.
23rd, your birthday? Happy
Empanadas
birthday.
would be nice.
I'll find out on the 5th what you like, and I'll bring that on the 23rd.
Yeah, we have two more items after the public hearing.
Okay, let's go to item number 4, public hearing. The Charter Review Commission is
Would you like to talk again?
willing to hear public input.
Right.
Yes, come on.
Two chances, huh? Thank you. Three meetings ago, I turned in a suggestion of 6 suggestions for the charter. And you remember that? And what happens to it?
That was actually, some of that was taken under advisement. I think one of the items that you had on that particular sheet was an auditor, which we had already discussed. There is
Okay.
a provision in the red line copy that was posted. I forget what section that was.
So you're working on an auditor, is what you're saying? That's a consideration?
Yes.
Okay. And the other one's just, if somebody doesn't pick it up, they just die? I hate to use that word, but
I'll have to go back and look at all of them because they might already have been either discussed or talked about, or they may already be in here. I have to go look at each one of them.
I know I was feeling well that night. I get a chance to read them into the minutes. They were attached to the minutes. Does it make a difference on this side of the podium here as to whether they're read into the minutes or whether they're just stapled to the minutes?
No,
They're still in the minutes.
they're still in the minutes.
They're still available publicly. Anybody can have them and they can review.
I guess what I'm looking for is to try and understand what happens when you submit a list. And if you happen to hit on one they're talking about, that's wonderful, but what do I get out of suggesting or instance to get suggesting something when you hear nothing? I don't understand that.
Well, like I just said a little bit ago, I'd have to go back and look at each one of those that was on there. I do remember the auditor because we had specifically discussed that in great detail.
Right, no, I understand that, but it's the other 5.
Right, I understand, but I'll have to go back and review them and see if we discussed each one of those items or where it came up. I think we were under the consensus that several of them we've already discussed.
Okay.
But I'll have to go back and look specifically for you.
Yeah, I just, seems like citizens and committees can't talk to each other, and I'm just kind of looking for a follow-up, and I'm not understanding the system, but I do understand, it sounds like that if somebody on the committee doesn't pick it up, it just goes by the wayside, is that correct?
Well, it's not a matter of somebody on the committee picking it up or not. The issue is, did we discuss it? Did we consider it? If the suggestion was made, it was considered, and if it didn't go any further than that, then it was considered not part of what we were doing or not something we were going to do. It's not it's not like proposing legislation where someone's gonna put it forth. It was discussed, considered as a whole by the committee.
Right, but was that done? Is that done on each item?
And she's told you a couple times that she would have to go back and look at the minutes which is what she's asked to do before the June 5th meeting to see, so she can do that.
I thought I understood the answer to be to go back and see that we had already discussed an auditor for that example, but the other 5 is what I referred to as picking up and then sponsored or whatever. Because I'm assuming, I shouldn't assume anything, but that you don't take like my list and then sit and talk about it. So no, we're not gonna do this one, this one, this one. That you can't do that. I don't know if you can or not, but I don't know how it works. But I just,
How you're suggesting is not how it works, and she did say that she would have to look at the minutes to consider the other ones. She remembered the auditor off the top of her head, and we all were here, and we all remember the auditor discussion off the top of our head. But we don't have that with us right now unless we have the minutes, which I actually do, but she's saying she would have to look at the minutes to see what happened with those suggestions.
Where
And I'm
would
just
I go
giving
to
you a
find
global.
that?
The minutes are online.
pardon me?
The minutes are all online.
Okay, so go to the minutes to find out how that was handled?
Yeah.
Mr. O'Connell, do you feel that your request is reasonable?
What?
She asked if you think your request is reasonable.
For us
She
to,
asked if you think your request is reasonable. That's what she's asking.
do you feel that your request is reasonable, that we would take time on the committee to address every single item that you have brought forth, even if they don't necessarily fall under the jurisdiction of this particular committee?
Ma'am, I have been here for 13 years in the city. I've been fighting the stuff that's going on in the city for 2 years. You're probably aware of that. And I'm here because I told you before, I have a little glimmer of hope. Okay, I hope I did not waste my time, and I can't believe you asked me that question. Do I think they're reasonable? I am not an unreasonable person, okay? And you shouldn't be able to answer that question if you saw the list. Thank you very much.
Okay. I don't see any other members of the public at this time. So I will move on to item number 5. Receive a report, hold a discussion, and provide staff feedback regarding benchmark of Ethics Commission to include appointments, removals, legal experience, and authority and power. All right, Amy.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Amy Alcorn, City Attorney for the record. Let's see if I can get this to work. Because often I forget to turn it on. Yep, there we go, I forgot to turn it on. Okay. So Article 12 of the city charter provides for information about the Ethics Code, the Ethics Commission. The things that are required, that we have to have an ethics code. I found it interesting that we do require commissioners to be each nominated by a single council member and confirmed by majority vote. We require independent legal counsel, and then we have specific provisions on gifts, interest in city contracts, conflicts of interest, and political contributions. At the last meeting, we had a really good discussion, I think, about the 12.01 specifically. And at the end of the meeting, the commission asked that we look into what other charters do. So I've done some benchmarking on this. Again, I turned to our 10-peer cities because these are the cities we use. They're common area, common issues. That's typically why we use them. Out of these 10 cities, again, they were vastly different. And I sent you some of the language by email, or at least Jennifer did for me by email, so you could see them. 3 of the cities really don't have any specific requirements on ethics or conflicts of interest in the charter. And then 4 of them don't specifically require a code of ethics. But despite that, all 10 of these cities have a code of ethics. They all have some sort of commission that reviews them. So that is very common. The most similar language to ours is Leander. In fact, it was virtually identical, except that it didn't require the appointment of the commissioners the way that we appoint them. So I found that interesting. And San Antonio is the only city in there that requires the appointment of the commission in the same manner that we do, where each council member nominates a commissioner, except that there they serve straight 3-year terms. They were not coterminous with council, so if their council member left, they stayed on unless removed for other reason. Further, Leander is the only one that required the appointment of an independent legal counsel. And the reason this is important is because we talked about some requirements for this independent legal counsel. And I'm looking in our area, there aren't a lot of cities where they're gonna have other experience doing this. And so it's gonna make it hard if we put too much language in on experience. Because the only other city that does this is Leander, the same way we do.
So, Commissioner Knight.
Although they may not require that kind of experience in their charter, do they require it in their ordinance?
Not that I saw, they do have reference to occasionally needing to hire an independent attorney. For example, if a council member has asked the city attorney a question, the city attorney's given the opinion, and then somebody files a complaint, then city attorney needs to hire somebody else because they've already given an opinion on that issue as a conflict issue. I personally like having an independent ethics attorney. I've said that at the last council meeting. I think it's a great idea. It avoids any kind of conflicts of interest with me having worked for council or for the city manager. My concern is if we say they have to have had 3 years doing ethics for cities, and there aren't a lot of cities that have a person who's assigned to do all the ethics, that's gonna be difficult to find somebody.
So if they didn't have an independent legal counsel for the ethics-related issues, the city attorney then stepped in?
Typically, the city attorney will step in unless there's a conflict, and then they'll hire
Okay.
somebody else.
All right.
I recall at the last meeting talking about this and pointing out, the issues like, with board-certified lawyers and whatnot, and saying
Right.
that I thought that would be, helpful to the points they're raising. Whether or not I agree with them, I would support you, but that to at least put suggestive, permissive language, preference would be given to someone such and such.
Right, we
But not
talked
make
about-
it a requirement.
We talked about somebody who's either board certified in administrative law or somebody who has a certain number of years of experience in municipal law. I'm just reminding the commission about the issue with trying to point to
Right.
work
No.
as an ethics attorney, because
I
that's gonna be
agree.
very specialized.
I
and difficult
remember
to find.
that. And we specifically said preference,
We did.
which didn't make it an absolute
Right.
requirement.
Right,
And everybody seems pretty happy.
and I'm absolutely fine with the preference, I'm just making sure we don't go back the other way, that's all I'm looking at.
I think,
I mean, I remember, in my tenure as a council member, we had a separate independent
Yeah,
ethics.
we did.
We have for a long time. I mean, whoever wrote the charter put that in, and like I said, I like it. It's nice to have an independent person look at these things, and attorneys, we disagree a lot, so it's nice to be able to bump ideas off each other too, when we disagree, and work together to try to make things more clear when we read them differently. So I think that's great.
I just didn't, and I don't know if we're going through different areas of this, but to clarify, the limits and the authority of the Ethics Commission, and then also the due process rights, because that's a growing trend across the nation with ethics commissions, is to ensure that we are providing and safeguarding due process.
At this point, it's a pretty open discussion. You can leave the language as it is, you can change any part of the language that you recommend changing. One of the one that I pointed out that started the conversation was the idea of how we appoint the ethics commissioners. And so if that's something that's worth discussing further, we can do that. It's really up to the commission. I've just shown you what other ones do. I sent out the benchmarking of what the other cities do. Jennifer sent it to you all by email, and then it was also in the backup.
Cedar Park's caught my eye with, under prohibited acts, section C. They just say a gift. No nominal value, no one's gonna interpret whether the gift was nominal value or not. It just says, will not accept or directly or indirectly a gift. And taking out the nominal value, so. Thought that was interesting.
I also like Pflugerville's definition of a travel and expense policy, which is actually in their charter.
I think you guys are hitting on something that's important, and just by experience as well, is that if you leave it broad, then you're gonna leave it to discretion, and everybody's discretion and thought process is different. And then you have the issue of enforceability. If you don't have it, at least to some level, then how do you enforce it, right? And I think that's probably the issues that we have in our current Ethics Commission is that we don't have a defined nominal value, whichever you want to call it. And I've seen some in the past do a dollar amount, but, I mean, again,
I think we did clarify that a nominal value is under $100.
We have a dollar amount. It's on our financial disclosure form as adopted by city council, and it's $100.
and that's in the Ethics Commission, that's going to be?
It's in the Code of Ethics,
Okay,
which
and that-
adopted that form.
Okay, and that'll be defined for the charter for people when they see it?
No, it's in the code, not the charter.
Okay.
One thing I like about that being in the code is that as inflation comes in, $100 is less and less and less, and so it's possible that council would want to consider raising that to $200 at some point, and it's much harder to do that if it's in the charter than it is in the code.
But if you just have gift, then you have to worry about a value, so there's no concern about raising it or lowering it. It just says you simply cannot receive a gift.
I'm going to note that Cedar Park says except as allowed by ordinance.
Yeah, I left that out on purpose.
I think the gift thing is, in some certain situations, if I'm given a gift and I pass you off $1 for that gift, it's no longer a gift, no matter what amount it is, right? So I just, those are things I think we really need to be specific about, and if we can, to arrange, because then you can enforce it. It's just hard to enforce. Very.
I understand how it looks on paper, but let me try to do this. In another realm, once upon a time, I was a misdemeanor prosecutor up in Williamson County for 6 years. And several friends of mine I made friends quickly with were some defense attorneys, and other friends of mine were coworkers, also prosecutors, who one by one, everybody leaves and becomes a defense attorney one day at a time. So I had a regular poker game with a bunch of defense attorneys, and I had a regular fantasy football group with a bunch of attorneys, defense attorneys. And, you know, we were held to a code of ethics that's in the Code of Criminal Procedure. And I think at the time it was either $25 or $50. And so if we go out, you know, one night to watch a football game together and somebody says, hey, I'm going to grab the check, you know, I mean, I'm not thinking at the moment, hey, this is a gift. I can't, you know, I have to pay my share. I mean, there were times, sure, but these people were my friends. And it's, I mean, I think we need to have some kind of at least a line. If we, you know, if we went out to a you know, a chicken wing place and everything was $10 or whatever, but if we went to a steakhouse, I'm gonna pay for the steakhouse because I'm pretty sure that's gonna exceed, and I don't want the appearance of impropriety. But I mean, I think we've got to give a baseline at some point, you know, in all of these, you know, ideas, because you do form relationships, and then, you know, the lines get a little blurry, and you're not trying to influence somebody, you're just being a good friend. I'll get the check this time, you get the check next time. And you don't want an unhappy citizen sitting across the restaurant who sees it, and now we have ethics committee meetings, you know, over that. So I feel like we should set a benchmark on that. And I agree with what Commissioner Ford said, or I think it was Commissioner Ford, somebody said about inflation, or you said it, Amy, right? Yeah, I agree. It's like I said, in the beginning of my career 30 years ago, I think it was $25 or $50. I know it's $100 now, and who knows what it might go up to. So we need to have a little bit of flexibility, but we also need a baseline.
It sounds horrible, but I always think of Class C theft. When I started prosecuting Class C theft was $50, now it's $100. It goes up with inflation.
Commissioner Knight.
Is there any state agency, or, I don't know, federal agency, but mainly state agency, that defines nominal value in terms of gifts and ethics?
I mean, I'm sure there are probably several places where nominal value is defined, and it's probably defined differently.
Could we not use one of those instead of just plucking something off a tree?
I think the good thing about what Judge Glickler just said is that it's a protection not only for
Yes.
the one that's going to be pointed out, hey, I saw them do this. It meets the criteria, here's the dollar amount, it's done. If we don't do it, which obviously, you know, as Ford presented that to me, is then it's always that mere appearance thing where everybody just thinks that that's all we're doing. And so that's the benchmark. I think it needs to be. It needs to be have some point where then a council member or an officer of the city can say, hey, I have fulfilled my obligation, and this is the amount. If it comes to that point where people are asking questions, it has to be public. Here it is, and it stops, because if, without that, it doesn't.
I think that's a good point, but I think to Mr. Glickler's point, the reason somebody like Cedar Park has that provision about as authorized by ordinance, and the reason you see stuff like this in the code, is if you have a personal relationship with somebody that's not related to your position with the city, and you get married or you have a baby and they give you a gift, just because they might also have some sort of relationship with the city, is that not allowed? If your family, if you were friends before you started working for the city. And so a lot of times they'll have provisions for a gift given for an occasion that's appropriate for that occasion and appropriate for the relationship between the parties.
So I just did a quick little Google search and I found an article out of Amarillo, Texas, in discussing the Social Security Act and talking about inducing Medicare or Medicaid beneficiaries, blah, 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 blah. They've defined nominal value. The Office of the Inspector General has interpreted the beneficiary inducement statute to not apply to a provider supplier providing gifts of nominal value, and they specifically define a nominal value means a retail value of no more than 15 per item or $75 in aggregate per patient on an annual basis. So, I mean, even going to nominal value, they're specifically defining it with a number. So in that context, it's, hey, if I give you $20 to fudge on your Medicaid application, that's a benefit. It exceeds nominal value and it violates. So for a single item as opposed to $75 for an aggregate per patient a year. So it's just an idea is that if we're going to talk about a nominal value, they're setting numbers. It doesn't have to apply to us, but I wanted to answer Lila's question.
I still get a little bit uncomfortable with putting exact numbers in the charter because it's very difficult to ever change them. And
Well, that's why I kind of wanted to have, nominal value as defined by the Texas Ethics Commission, the Inspector General.
I started with the specific search with the
Right.
and there wasn't anything there. But I think to combine the points, I think what we can say is the nominal value as defined by ordinance of the city,
Yeah.
then let the
and then let that be an
council,
ordinance matter.
council would then name an amount, and that amount
Right.
could change as
And-
appropriate.
And we could even say, and now a nominal value needs to specify, require that it specify an amount, so they get one ordinance, and then it can only be changed by ordinance, but not leave part of this statement would require that the nominal value be created.
Well, I think you could also specify a requirement that they name a single gift nominal amount and annual nominal amount, so that they're not getting $3 here and there all year long, and then it adds up.
Yeah,
Right.
I like that.
We can put something like that together. That seems reasonable to me. So that's 12.02, which is acceptance of gifts. Most of what I was looking at was more 12.01. If anyone has comments on that one.
We did that.
Again, the discussion for that, for me, that really stands out is, defining that, not in the charter, but again, having that location where it describes their authority and that there's to ensure the due process rights of the
Okay.
accused.
I think that's a good suggestion. I want to make sure that the due process is clearly provided.
After seeing all your benchmarking as to 1201, the one we discussed a lot last time was about, the two issues was how they're appointed and advised by the independent legal counsel. But after seeing the benchmarking, I'm comfortable with it being the city council appointments. But I would also say that if the majority felt that the one city that has, that their term, the Ethics Commission appointment terms are permanent by a term of years, regardless of whether or not their the appointing council member is still on council or not. I kind of like that as a compromise.
So the San Antonio model, where each council member nominates a person for appointment, subject to confirmation by the full council, for a 2 or 3 year term, which continues even if their council member falls off in that time.
I really don't, I don't have a problem with that, and I'll tell you why. Because it allows that individual to be independent and do their job as commissioned by the committee. And there's not gonna be any influence either way, right? There shouldn't be anyways, but to have that in a situation where you're not, and you feel confident that regardless of what's going on at that level, which is the political level and legislative level, that I'm still here at this capacity doing this regardless. So you're gonna have term limits, but regardless of whether it's split between 2 different council members, I don't think is an issue.
So are you talking about option 1 or option 2?
It's not really an option on this slide. It was,
No.
Mr. Glickler just suggested the
Right.
San Antonio model, which I can go back. I cannot go back, that's weird. Couple of slides.
Yeah, where each city councilman appoints
So,
one.
at the bottom, San Antonio has a
I-
process where each council member nominates a commissioner, but their term limits are not coterminous with council, so their
What
term
is the
limits
population of San Antonio?
significantly larger. I don't know exactly.
Millions.
I know it's over 1 million. I don't know if it's over 2 off the top of my head.
It's also, I don't know if it's the oldest, it might be the second oldest city in the state. So they have a very long history.
Yeah, I understand that.
is that good or bad?
I think that their form of municipal government has gone through many changes over hundreds of years.
That is accurate. Really, the thought process is just, that's the only other city that does the process we do, where each council member nominates a commissioner for confirmation by the full council.
My
Which was the question we started with, is do we want to
why
do it
is it
that
a
way?
peer city? They're not our peers.
Okay.
I think it just builds consistency. You don't want something to change in the middle of a term while they're working on it, regardless of, we're not talking about right now where we are right now, right? We have this that was provided to us to work on this particular issue. But in the future, as we change and we continue to get more and more, and our charter gets bigger, different issues come, we don't know that we're gonna have a point where they're working in the middle of a project and there's a change, and then to start all over again for that commission?
Yeah, the original question from the last meeting was whether we want them nominated by a council member at all, or whether we want to follow our standard process where all 7 choose from a group of people, and that's all that it is. So it's not a specific council member bringing somebody in. That was the original question.
The more I've thought about it, and plus what I've witnessed in the last 2 weeks, I feel very, very strongly that I don't like the application process for the Ethics Commission. I feel very, very strongly about it. It has the ability to be weaponized by a very, very tiny group of people if it's done that way, because, you know, like Howard said earlier, right? You know, in regards to something we discussed earlier about city employees are going to know that something's going up for auction. Well, how does everyone else know? Well, everyone else knows that if they care. Okay, if it's publicly posted, I don't care if it's a newspaper and it's the year 2025. If you care, pay attention. You know, there's people in my profession have to read the classified ads in every single newspaper in the country for probate matters and other kinds of things, legal matters. And so if you care, you know, and very few people care enough to know. And if you do that with turning the Ethics Commission into a kind of application process, it becomes very dangerous. So, and I understand the current atmosphere in the city and the concerns, which is why I am open to the idea, because obviously, let's say this goes into effect, and we could even make it retroactive, right? So all 7 members of the Ethics Committee right now were all appointed by a city council member that's on the council right now. Well, some are gonna drop off in the next couple of years, but that appointee will stay on, but then appointees can drop off a committee like we've already had once. And then, so whoever appointed this district seat that appointed that person, now they're gonna get to appoint someone. So within a very short amount of time, you're gonna have several people on the ethics committee who were not appointed to it by anyone who's currently on city council. And when we get to that point, I think we'll all feel, anyone who has a concern, and I want to make it clear that I don't, but has a concern about either how the ethics committee has handled in their business outside of the due process argument, we're going to get to a point quickly where there's few ties from the current committee to the current city council. And that's why I do like San Antonio, but anything beyond the appointment process now, I'm very strongly against.
Commissioner Knight.
The way it's set up currently, if someone is on the Ethics Commission and they were appointed by a particular councilman, and their terms are what, 2 years?
Yeah, their term is as long as the council member.
Yeah, so there's always, that seat is always tied to a particular councilman.
It's the term of the council member who appoints them. So when that term
Right.
expires, theirs expires. If that council member
So
falls
a
off,
councilman is
they fall off.
always gonna have a representative.
Right,
on
but if that councilman loses an election, falls off, resigns, falls off, whatever happens, the ethics commissioner falls off as well. And that's what San Antonio does differently. So the ethics commissioner would stay on until that seat is vacant, and then the new person could appoint for that same seat. That's the difference.
I kind of like that. It's less pressure. There would be less, inclination to be influenced by whoever appointed them in the first place. If they know that their position is secure regardless, I think that solves some of its own ethical issues.
I think it's a compromise, because to Commissioner Glicker's point, you could also, if I could play devil's advocate, you could have several council members that are all buddy-buddy, or the good old boys, and they appoint who their buddy-buddies are, and then we don't have an unbiased ethics commission or an unbiased council.
Well, and I agree with that, but also, it would take 7 not so ethical people on the ethics commission to get there. I mean, you may have 1 or 2 who feel beholden to their appointee or appointer or whatever, but I mean, I'd like to think that when we voted for this person and they won the election, that they are at least going to come out of the blocks doing the right thing and come up with some that they're one of the most ethical people they know that's willing to do the job. But I also like the idea of getting it separate, and it's going to take some time to get there, but we would get there where the ethics commission member would be separate from the seat that they were tied to.
I also don't think that we can cover for every conceivable bad intention. We can try, we can compromise, but sometimes, bad things are going to happen, but we have to be willing to, trust our process and tweak as necessary.
I agree. As a council member, in coming in and actually talking to several prior to this and coming on and having this discussion, just so I can be in the right frame of mind on who I would select, was someone that kind of knew my character, understood what the kind of work I was trying to accomplish to a certain degree. And then you would pick somebody that is willing to stand up and address certain issues that come out and talk on those issues. That's more, again, I hate to bring it back and hit it again, but I think a lot of us were concerned about due process. And so as long as I like that system, as long as there's clear language in the ordinance, in wherever you think is appropriate, that due process will be safeguarded, I think it alleviates a lot of thought process that council members will have, right?
I do personally think that one is appropriate for the charter, so
Okay.
I've made a note to find some due process language and add to the
I think
charter.
that really solves a lot. 'Cause
That's
they're
one of
gonna
those things
yeah.
that if they're gonna take it out, you want it to be hard.
Yeah.
When you're talking about due process.
And I know I've said a lot on this issue, and I have very strong opinions on it, but I'll end just simply kind of with this. There are people out there, and unfortunately for us, there's only been one person out there that's been repeatedly hammering away at us about certain things. And I do think this addresses globally points he's brought forward, and I'm willing to compromise on that behalf. Much of what he's brought to us to complain about is ethics related. And if we can do anything to address his global complaints, I think one of them is that if we take all power out of each and every council member and the mayor, even if we have to leave 90% of the power there, we do. But again, I repeat, after 6 years, I think we would have a mix, and that would accomplish what a lot of people want to see happen. Not all the way, but it's something, and I think it is a good compromise.
Okay, so I think I've heard that we want to continue letting council nominate, but we want to have a term that is not coterminous with council.
Fixed
We
terms.
want to clarify that it's a fixed term of 3 years. Or 2, whatever you guys want, but 3 was my suggestion.
Right, so if they serve more than 6 years, they have to pick a new person, right?
We could put that in as well.
Well, didn't we already say that a council member can't serve more than 6 years?
Council member can serve no more than 9.
9.
9.
3 terms.
Yeah.
So it would either the suggestion would be to be in the same tandem with the council member if they choose to repeat the same person for the 9 years? Or do they pick a new person?
I think 6 years maximum for ethics, and that would give a little more turnover to the Ethics Commission.
And I've been thinking about this, the numbers game, the whole way along, and I think that we'd want the language to be specific, that an Ethics Commission member's term starts with the appointment, and will run 3 years from that date, regardless of any change in office of the council member who appointed that person. And that person is eligible to be reappointed for another 3-year term by whatever council member sits in that seat. So in other words, once anything happens differently in that seat, somebody steps down or a committee member steps down and has to get replaced, that's a 3-year term for that committee member from the date of appointment. So that's how you start to separate the attachment to the council member.
So there's no partial terms.
So,
That gets logistically difficult on a city staff perspective because we have to track everybody's term to the date. So normally we track them, they all expire on approximately the same date, and we track the year.
so if I'm elected for a partial term, just as an example,
Right.
my Ethics Commission member would start at that point and then say, I don't get reelected. Af-
You shouldn't be picking one.
Oh, I shouldn't be picking one
No, if
because,
come in midterm.
Midterm, okay.
You coming in
All
on my
right.
seat, you're gonna take whoever I had.
Well,
Alright.
I mean, every committee member, us included too, right? We all had to execute documents with Jennifer, and those documents have to be maintained as part of the public records of the city of Kyle. And we're talking about 7 individuals. I don't think it would be that hard to just go back and look and go, okay, this person started April 3rd, 2024. Their term expires April 2, 2027. I mean, I don't think that's that logistically difficult. I don't know if that specificity is not necessary in the charter, but I mean, I think it's an easy thing to track. Because if we put this in place and the council adopts it, okay, and we make it retroactive to this ethics commission that's sitting right now, we have a date certain for all 7 of them, and from that point forward, it would be easy to track.
Commissioner,
I agree with Commissioner Lickler, and I'm sorry for staff, but y'all are pretty well paid, and I have total confidence in Jennifer that she can keep track of this.
And I'm sure Lila would volunteer to create a spreadsheet where it would start, and you just keep that spreadsheet forever.
I would, but no one would be able to read it.
It would just be different than the other boards and commissions, and that's something to point out. The other boards and commissions all have a date certain, and they allow for partial terms. So this would just be a different process. It's already a different process, so that may not be bad. I just point it out.
So if I'm sitting on the ethics board and I have a 3-year term and I get off at 1.5 years, and you're my council member that appointed me, you're appointing a new person to finish out that 3-year term or to start a new 3-year term?
Currently, it would
Okay.
be to finish it out.
Well, currently it would be to finish it out because you're tied to the council member, but if it's a 3-year, anyone appointed gets a 3-year term.
And based
So-
on his suggestion, it would be a new term.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking on the new.
Based on his
So-
suggestion, yes, it'd be a new term.
So I leave it a year, I leave. Someone else gets appointed, they're getting appointed for a full 3-year term.
Correct.
Yes.
Gotcha, okay.
And that helps stagger it out over time.
And it helps maintain the independence.
It does also give a way to game the system, just again, to be aware. Somebody resigns a month before the end of a council member's term, that council member gets to replace them for 3 years. So, I like to be a devil's advocate. I find holes and I point them out to you.
All right, well, we could put in a clause, something to the effect of that any resignation within 90 days of the end of a term.
You have to,
Go on.
you have to appoint a person within so many days of holding office. And once you, but they could still do that.
She's talking about the reverse, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If a commissioner really wants to let their buddy on council appoint their replacement, they resign at the end of a term.
They obviously should not have been an ethics commissioner if they're.
I don't
willing to
disagree
do
with you
that.
on that. I just,
But I don't
I've
mind
told you this
saying,
whole time, I point out holes.
so let me clarify your question. Now, you're saying that if an ethics committee member resigns shortly before the end of the 3 years,
Right.
I'd put a 90-day, I'd put a 90-day block on it. If an ethics commission member resigns 90 days prior to the end of their term, that seat shall remain vacant
Until the new council.
until the end of that term. Because remember, at some point in the future, the term is not going to be tied to the council member.
Well, no, it's if they resign within 90 days of the council member's term ending.
Okay.
To allow the council member to appoint somebody else for
On their
3
way
years
out.
on their way out.
Right. If it's within 90 days of the end of the council member's term,
Right.
then that seat shall remain vacant until the new council member takes office.
I mean, we're getting into the weeds, but
Yeah.
it's still.
But
something to
it's
think
worth
about.
talking through the weeds. If we could do it in the charter, great.
I know, I'm getting into the weeds. I'm sorry, Lala.
Maybe we'll see the forest before we see the weeds. Mhm. So I had a question. And that clause I liked on Pflugerville, it just seems like that clause might remedy some of this credit card crap.
I'm gonna have to go find Pflugerville. Which one?
As set out in chapter, Pflugerville, section 11.05.
Pflugerville 11.05. Which part?
It's set out in chapter 36 Penal Code 2. A travel and expense policy regulating the expenditure of public funds for travel, conferences, and entertainment. And 3, restrictions on the city officials or employees serving as surety for the performance of any person doing business with the city, or as surety for any city officer or employee required to make a surety bond.
So we want a travel policy included in the code of ethics.
Well, I don't
Travel
know.
and expenditure policy.
I don't know.
Okay. I mean, that seems to be what you're suggesting. Am I misunderstanding you?
Was that part of Pflugerville's?
It sounds like it's required to be under their charter.
Okay.
Well, for those non-legal lawyers, Penal Code Chapter 36 is titled Bribery and Corrupt Offenses,
Oh,
and it's under the Title 8, which is Offenses Against Public
But
Administration,
But
so.
these are separate things. So they want it to include 1, chapter 36, 2, the travel and expense policy, and 3, the
Okay.
security issues.
okay.
Well,
I definitely don't have an issue with chapter 36 being included. I think chapter 36 is probably already included just without direct reference to it in our code of ethics. The travel and expense policy that we have is outside of the code of ethics. We do have one, it's just not in the code of ethics. And so that was my question, is would that need to then be moved into the code of ethics under your suggestion?
I would have to think about that a little more.
We can continue this conversation on.
well,
I kind of like it,
let's,
because it's saying, it's in the charter, but it's specifying that the code of ethics will provide guidance at a minimum of blah, blah, blah.
Right.
I like that.
So it's not defining what the travel and expense policy will be.
Right.
It's just requiring council to put that in the code of ethics.
Right.
Correct.
Which
Yeah,
is
I
my
like
question.
that.
Yeah.
I like that.
especially like Chapter 36.
Again, I'd argue all of that is included in our policy, but I understand what you're saying. We don't specifically reference Chapter 36, but I would think that somebody accepting a bribe would violate our current code of ethics as it's written.
Well, no, but chapter 36 applies to everyone in the state, so.
I like that.
And I
And
noticed that-
it's defined inside that chapter what a bribe is too, so.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Alright.
that's fine.
I'm gonna make the note on the Pflugerville language.
I think that's an advisory and it's also a protection at the same time.
And then to Commissioner Kirkwood, were you looking at Cedar Park, section 11.09, conflicts of interest prohibited? Is that this section you were looking at?
Yes, ma'am. The part about the gifts?
I was looking at the whole thing.
Well, the gift part caught my eye, but I
Yeah.
mean,
For what it's worth, gifts is in chapter 36 of the People Code.
Oh, it's in chapter 36?
Yeah.
Oh, so we could just reference chapter 36 and get rid of the gift language.
Absolutely.
Okay, interesting.
Well, it's benefit.
You just know how I feel about deleting a bunch of language referencing state law. It's so much easier.
I know. But in chapter 36. Like I need a microphone. Chapter 36 says benefit means anything reasonably regarded as pecuniary gain or pecuniary advantage, including benefit to any other person in whose welfare the beneficiary has a direct and substantial interest. So it covers kind of, family members and related people. It defines the offense of what bribery is. And you can't, and so benefit is the same as gift in that vernacular.
well, yeah, I guess
And it gives you discretion.
a benefit and a gift, the same. I'm assuming we have penalties in our actual ethics code? Because I noticed a couple of these cities call out the penalties.
Yes, we do.
Okay. And how do they compare with these peer cities? These are 5 years, ineligible to hold office for 5, or employment for 5 years after removal or dismissal.
I don't believe we have anything about future holding office or
Well, maybe we need to add something.
That-
Conflicts of interest section.
maybe more appropriate for the code itself as opposed to the charter, but it's something to think about.
Oh, yeah.
So, just to wrap that up, so the benefit is specifically defined in chapter 36. And then section 36.09 is offering gift to public servant. And it has gift in the title of the statute, but the definition of an offense is if you offer, confer, or agree to confer any benefit. So benefit and gift are basically interchangeable.
Okay, it's interesting. I have a whole lot of notes, so I think I'm gonna take a shot on how to put these notes together. And it may or may not turn out well. We'll find out in June.
I really like section 11.09, conflicts and interest prohibited from the Cedar Park. All too many times I complain about item number 2 under section D. With this current council.
Okay, I'll make a note on our conflicts of interest section to look at the Cedar Park language and see if I can work that in a little bit.
Because ours is just one paragraph.
To go look at, I looked at too many of these, so I have to go look at what Cedar Park was.
I mean, I don't know about the penalties, but, section.
The declaration of the contract is void is in our code of ethics. The prohibition on future employment is not, to my knowledge, in our code of ethics.
Okay.
Under those penalties in the Cedar Park.
I don't know, look at it, maybe give us some feedback.
Okay. We'll see how well I can read all of your minds and put this together for June.
You're doing a pretty good job so far.
I have about 7 or 8 notes on this ethics section to try to put it all together, so we'll see.
And now she's gonna be mad at me because I cost her 4 extra days of preparation.
No, that's fine. We're not meeting on the 26th, so I got plenty of time.
She's got Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah, got like a whole 3-day weekend in there. Anything else on the ethics?
Commissioner Knight.
Just to add that Pflugerville, section 11.05, under purpose and policy, actually sort of addresses my issue that this section of our charter never really states what the purpose of that article is, and it does do that.
Okay. We'll look at
Kind
that
of,
language.
sort of, not great, not strong, but it's at least there.
It's a starting point.
Yeah.
Okay, I can look at that. So I am looking at 8 o'clock, and I know we talked about doing item 6 at a future meeting. Do we want to just skip it tonight and bring it all back at the future meeting?
I feel like we should table it for tonight and bring it all back on, with some of our suggestions that we made tonight on the 5th.
Second.
Agreed.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. And that was everything on Article 12, I believe?
Yes.
Okay.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All right. We are adjourned at 8:02. Thank you, everyone.